Hey, how's it going, guys? The Pretty Boy Offense. My name's Saj, and we are about to do my Week 8 review of the NFL season. A lot of interesting games this weekend. I'm gonna be fully honest. I missed the ball on some of my love and hates this week. The love games I had outside of the Rams beating the Texans. The other two love games I had, they did not come to fruition. I'll talk about them later on, but this was. I talked about this being a really interesting week. I thought that we kind of had a lot of teams pegged, but this one, it just kind of caused a bit more confusion. So as we go through these games, we're going to really see what more we can pull out from these games, learn about these teams, and hopefully if you're still alive in your survivor pool, I can give you some information that will help you. Um, a lot of really interesting stuff. But yeah, let's start. Packers versus Cardinals, first week, the Thursday night game. What should we take away from this? So the Cardinals are in a situation. I think outside of talking about the Packers, where Aaron Rodgers did great with what little wide receivers he had. The Cardinals were in a really interesting situation, very similar to what I kind of saw with the Titans, where Tannehill had made mistakes, Kyler Murray had made mistakes. They weren't playing their best, but come to the end of the game, they were both those teams were still in their games, still had a chance to win it, still had a chance to remain as dominant as they have been. And in the case of the Cardinals, they easily could have had that touchdown at the end with AJ Green, not turning around for it, hearing the audible to change and everything. So that kind of screwed them there. But I think what are the Cardinals? They're everything we thought they were still. There's nothing really to change that. A loss to the Packers, even though it was a weakened Packers team, that team didn't run through the wide receivers. That team was running through the running backs. And we knew the Cardinals had a bit of a leaky run defense team, especially when you're going against A.J. Dillon, who is always falling forward for yards, and then Aaron Jones is just a super talented guy that we all know. There was some controversy with the goal line stuff with which touchdowns should have standed, which ones shouldn't have. We saw the refs go back on the second Aaron Jones TD that they, said was in, but then came out and said there wasn't. And then the first one that he had, had it cross the line? Nobody really knew, but they already called it a touchdown, so they couldn't go back on it. I feel like the conversation in their own locker room during halftime was the reason they went back on the other one, where it was just well, there's nothing definitive here. We kind of screwed them already, but credit to the Packers for winning that game, coming in there undermanned. But I think it's really important that when we look at that Packers team too, we notice that they're playing with so little of their starters. Like we talked about, all their wide receivers. They don't have Bakhtiari yet. I feel like the last few weeks have been saying Bakhtiari should be coming back, but he's just not coming back. I don't know why. But okay, so he should be coming back this week. And, whenever you have an all-pro or Pro Bowler, guy on your offensive line that you're missing, whenever he's coming back, it's going to help your team. And then you also, have so many injuries in their secondary that they need to address right now, despite, how well Rasul Douglas has paid of recently. And, getting that INT against his old team, the Cardinals, was kind of a nice touch for him. But moving away from this game, it's still two good NFC teams. Teams that we would like to use if you haven't used them already. I think with the Packers, though, they've kind of shown that they're an on-off team. They kind of go through spurts or moments where they play super inspired football, look like the best team in the league, but then other times they look like they're giving up a lot on the ground. They're just not really producing well, and maybe that's because of injuries and stuff. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see how they kind of settle out once they get these injured guys back, because they're one of the teams that they're getting their injuries back right now. A lot of other teams, like these top teams, are kind of losing guys, are still in that middle ground of trying to address those issues. Speaking of addressing issues, there's about an hour before the trade deadline. I don't think anything big's going to happen. It usually doesn't in the NFL, so I'll talk about any acquisitions as we go through that has happened. One thing to note for the Cardinals, they're playing San Fran this weekend, and they might be without Kyler Murray. He's nursing an ankle injury, so I'll do a full preview show later this week, but something to keep in mind is maybe we don't touch the Cardinals against a San Fran team that's kind of playing better football. Jimmy Garoppolo looks fully healthy. He was making some throws in his game. But yeah, this feels like one of those iffy weeks where if the Cardinals still aren't fully healthy with their quarterback situation and everything like that, then it could be a really good opportunity for San Fran to beat the Cardinals, right? Not that I'd ever bet on it for Survivor, but just something to keep in mind if you ever want to pick the Cardinals this week. Okay, so moving on, though, as we talked about San Francisco did end up beating Chicago, which was a really entertaining game. I think the This was one of the first games we actually. This was the only game. Sorry, not one of the first. This was the first game that we saw Justin Fields actually get to utilize his full athletic spectrum on the football field, and they did it with a lot of rollouts. They did it with a lot of play action stuff where he was getting to the edge, and whether he was making a pass or trying to take advantage of space. That's what an athletic guy like Justin Fields can do. He had 103 yards rushing on 10 attempts, which is awesome. This is really something you want to see for fantasy football, but also for a team that's trying to figure out its identity. When your quarterback can do that for you, it gives you an identity, and it's a relatively safe identity outside of the injury risk. But when you're a guy like Justin Fields who's still trying to learn about how open a window is in the NFL, or how how to really gauge your throws in the NFL, because that's a big a big change from college to the pros. This is a good flow. It just keeps your head above water, so that every week when you're learning and hopefully getting better, you also have this kind of base that just keeps your team relevant and in the game. And I think one of the most important things to know about that is Nagy was not coaching this game. He had COVID issues, so he was not at the game. So they had another play caller. And I think when you kind of, I don't want to say dumb down, but when you simplify an offense a bit and you just try and play to the strengths of your team, against a team like San Francisco, who does have some injuries and is still trying to find its defensive identity with Salah gone and stuff like that, it was a really good, perfect storm for Fields to just take advantage of it. And what else do we have? The San Fran's defense is still I think we have to start reevaluating them as maybe below middle of the pack. I don't want to say bad, but they're underperforming. They're not where they should be, and it might be something that we have to start looking at, or something that we will be looking at to exploit depending on the opponents that they're playing. If Kyler Murray was healthy, Kyler Murray against this defense would have been awesome, but if it's Colt McCoy, then we can't for this week coming. But yeah, but then on the flip side of that, San Fran's offense started to find its groove, and I know the Bears' defense is supposed to be its strength, but this was just an underperforming week for them. They weren't getting as much pressure as they needed. Their cornerbacks were getting burned, especially with the yak stuff that San Francisco was built off of. But Jimmy Garoppolo is also making some really nice throws. You can see that his calf is fully healthy now. He should be taking control. I think this trade down is going to go past. They have to probably keep Jimmy if they want a chance of making playoffs and keeping their season alive. But yeah, it was I think a good outing for San Francisco. How bettable are they in the future? I still don't know yet. I'd really like that defense to show us something before we ever consider taking them. And then Chicago, when Nagy comes back, is he going to do more? Is he going to go back to doing some play calling stuff? I don't know. So that's kind of hard to really trust Chicago with anything. But if Justin Fields is going to be allowed to do this mobility stuff and this athletic stuff, they're going to be a really spicy pick to kind of upset certain weeks, right? So that we'll have to keep an eye out. But for future stuff, I did like the growth that Chicago was showing, even though it was kind of schemed up and up there. So Justin Fields, whether he is a better quarterback this week than he was last week, I don't know, but he did perform better, and I think the team's trying to figure out how to use him better, which is always good. All right, so Steelers-Browns, which was kind of a messy game when we start talking about the injuries, when we start talking about the execution and stuff like that. I just, I have here, why is Baker Mayfield playing? You can tell, I know he was injured, and yes, I credit the guy for being super tough, coming out and, trying to give his team the best chance to win, but there's something off there. He's not making the throws at a completion rate that he should be, confident in and, wanting to come back. You can want to come back, but you got to be able to take a step back and be a little more, self-critical and see that you're not helping your team. He's missing a lot of open receivers throughout the whole game. His receivers weren't helping him. The odd time he did hit his receivers, Jarvis Landry was dropping passes, so that didn't help at all. It seems like this is just a team that kind of got a little caught up in the moment. And then we even talk about, I talk about their offense a lot, and I know they're dealing with, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and working into Dearness Johnson, the injuries and stuff like that. But then when we talk about their defense, which was supposed to be stout, supposed to be one of the league's best, and even they're letting teams move the ball on them when we go back to the Cardinals and stuff like that. It's a really, really bad team. I don't want to say that they read headlines. I think there's something's off. They're just kind of void of some real veteran leadership there, if that's even a thing that I can quantify or understand. I've never played in the NFL, obviously, so I don't know how much I can really bring mention to that. But yeah, just going back, it's just 6 drop passes from guys like Landry, who are sure-handed receivers. Baker missing open guys. There's really just no confidence. And then we go on the flip side of that, where we go to the Steelers, and we're kind of expecting the type of performance that the Browns put up out of the Steelers, where it's like Ben Roethlisberger, a broken quarterback who shouldn't be able to complete passes, and he's doing enough, but the run game's kind of like what's keeping them alive. And then the Browns can even beat a team who had like kicker injuries and had to deal with all that kind of drama during the game. It just was a really messy game. I don't know what we can take away from it in terms of positive or negatives on the Steelers side, because I think this really is just what the Steelers is, what the Steelers team like amounts to be, just literally a 15-point team that, if you're not going to score more points than that, then like sure, they'll just run the ball and like be consistent enough to get that many points, but the Browns should be scoring more, but they aren't. So I think it's just more disappointing like production outing by the Browns. So Steelers, I don't want to move the needle at all. Like, yes, they beat the Browns, and yes, that's great for like their division rankings. I'm pretty sure they jumped the Browns into the division now because of this, but this is more just like baggage on the Browns. Like, I don't know if we're going to be able to ever confidently take the Browns in the coming weeks with just the way they're playing, because nothing's guaranteed right now. This is tough to see, especially with this roster, which I thought was like one of the best in the league, if not the best. But okay, moving on from that, Colts versus Titans, which was another huge like impactful game on the AFC playoff picture and just the football landscape, where if the Colts had won this game, they're right back in it, the contention for the AFC South. Carson Wentz has been playing really good the last few weeks. He hasn't had an interception in a while, which was like really benefiting them. A wild concept. If a quarterback doesn't throw an interception, it helps your team. But yeah, I think it wasn't anything negative on either of these teams. I'll talk about Carson Wentz in a second, but you see the Titans, and they're kind of benefiting from a lot of like what people in the community are kind of like variance plays, which are like the 50-50 balls and stuff like that, or like fumble recoveries and stuff. You saw Tannehill throw an interception, and on that like interception, like bring back the guy like fumbles and drops the ball and his knee explodes and stuff like that. So it's kind of tough when like we're seeing the Titans win, but you're seeing it's on these like kind of plays that aren't bankable or repeatable and stuff like that. It's just it is what it is. So they just keep winning, and I guess at some point we have to start considering them to keep doing this. But then the Derrick Henry injury comes up, and he's going to be out for the year. So now they have Adrian Peterson, they have McNichols, they have their wide receivers, which are obviously an unreal like duo in Julio Jones and AJ Brown. But is that going to be enough now when you have to change the identity of this team to solely throwing? And I've been high on Tannehill this year. He's been one of the best pocket quarterbacks from a clean pocket producing, but part of that is because teams have to respect the run so much. So, it's going to be really interesting to pick the Titans in any coming weeks, but I think we can do so confidently. I still think it's a good team. We'll have to make sure we pick those moments appropriately. In terms of the Colts, this kind of feels like a nail in the coffin for their season. I know there's still like half the season to go, but to go to 3-5 and have the Titans go to 6-2, especially in that AFC. If you're not winning your division, it's so hard to bet on anything to get into playoffs. So it just really feels like a nail in the coffin. But the best part about it is, if the Colts keep playing as good as they are, they're still a viable pick for us in Survivor. And I wanted to talk about that Carson Wentz INT. Like, yeah, it was really bad, but like the difference between him potentially getting like a safety there and then having to kick it off to the Titans, or like throwing the pick six and getting the ball kicked back to you, it doesn't really matter. It's still a bad decision. Like, you don't want to make that decision at all. But in terms of like football math, like it kind of didn't matter too much, but like it was still a terrible decision, and you don't want to see that out of your quarterback. But when it's like the only decision that ended up costing them, like that sucks. Sorry, I was just like caught there thinking. But Carson Wentz has been known to do those like really wonky left-handed throw things, kind of the stuff we see out of Patrick Mahomes like this year that just isn't landing, and he's putting his team in bad spots. So that always does suck. But yeah, so the Colts, I do start to feel more confident in them. Their defense is playing better too, which is awesome. They helped Derrick Henry all game, so always good. All right, so Panthers Falcons. what is there to learn about in this game? It's kind of what we expected. We expected this was like kind of the Panthers game to win if they're going to win a game after like their ups and downs. It would have been against the Falcons where they have some games in division against. Gilmore makes that pick on Pitts. So, I mean, the Panthers are doing what a lot of people, and like myself included, have thought that the Falcons should do, which is treat Pitts like a receiver, not like a tight end. And Gilmore's, he's done this in the past. He's marked up with like Travis Kelce and stuff like that. So he's no stranger to playing like big pass catchers like that. Ended up working in this. Darnold played a okay game. Like he kind of got his head above water, which was nice. I have him here for 13, 24 for 129 yards. So like not terrible. But it was most of the decisions that he was making, they were decent decisions. So it was helping his team in that sense. But then that concussion's brutal. But then also you're playing against the Falcons, so that Falcons defense gives up yards. And I know, like I said, his yards and stuff they didn't look that impressive. But in the actual game, he was like just making the right reads and stuff, which was nice. The Robbie Anderson hit, holy that guy got hit by a truck though. He got laid out. But kind of the flip side of that, the other side of the coin, Matt Ryan, he went back. So he was playing a really great few games leading into this. But then, he had the TD, but he had the 2 INTs and stuff. So opposite side, just bad decision. And what I kind of liked with the Falcons was if Matt Ryan was going to keep playing in that nice form, he could really build on something. With this whole Calvin Ridley issue, he was probably going to have to zone in on Patterson and Pitch, which I don't even think is a bad thing. I've been talking about how maybe this offense has too many weapons, not in like a sense that they're stealing the show from one another, but I think when you have a rookie head coach like Arthur Smith who's trying to figure out the best game plan for teams and you give him too many options, I think you end up getting a little too creative, kind of in the sense of like Chicago and stuff like that, where it's like you almost want to simplify it, just let your good players be good, put them in situations where they'll succeed, and you're almost better for it on the competitive level that you're expecting, which is of the Falcons, which is like a middling level of competition. So now with like Darnold injured, we have to start thinking about what the Panthers are moving forward, because concussions do mess up players, and going in a concussion protocol and dealing with all that stuff is a concern. And like I said, I don't expect them to be making any quarterback moves, so it looked like it could be PJ Walker maybe like next week or something. Or even if Darnold does come back, does he really have the mental fortitude to play through that? Because a concussion, even if you are cleared to play, does have lingering effects on you. Something to note, not that the Panthers are high flying top survivor picks, but if we feel like there's a sneaky pick coming up and stuff with them, that these are things that we have to deal with. But I think one of the promising things was the Panthers defense getting back to where it had to be. All their pass rushers looked like they were playing great. Hassan Reddick is back to his Temple days when he used to get coached by Matt Rule, which is always good to see. That guy's really talented. And then when they have Gilmore performing the way he is, I think that's a really great thing for this defense. Hopefully that's enough to buoy them and create them some viability as a survivor pick later on this year for anybody who still has them. But yeah, the Falcons, I think we gotta stop hoping for the Falcons, especially with this Calvin Ridley news. I know I just said that maybe having less weapons is better, but it would have been nice if Matt Ryan still would have come out of this game with a decent stat line. I probably would have kept buoyed by it, but now, no, not at all. So I'm kind of sleeping the Falcons a bit, but the Panthers, I think, we just got to sleep the Panthers. They might be a desperate play later on. Dolphins-Bills. So this was a really scary one for a lot of survivors, folks. I saw the final score of this game when it happened, and I was like, oh, it looks like it would have been typical Bills game. And then I went back, and when I watched the game, not a typical Bills game. What was it, 3-3 at half, and then I have 10 here in the third. It was, it figured itself out in the fourth, but anybody who had maybe taken the Bills in Survivor was probably sweating for a while with this, which, I completely expect. So where are the problems in this game? I think the Bills did their thing. The Bills did what they were supposed to do. I think the minute you have, Josh Allen, put up a pretty good stat line, he was doing whatever he had to do. But I think it's just a matter of the Dolphins aren't really what we all expected them to be. And yes, it's been 8 weeks now. We could probably finally figure out what they are, but they're not very good. Tua is better than Brissett. Tua makes Waddle more relevant. And I think the team is better with Tua than with Brissett. But that being said, it's not he's not good enough to fix the issues. Like he's not gonna be Justin Herbert. He's not gonna be Joe Burrow. These two quarterbacks that we see that can, kind of almost will their team to a victory. When everything's going right around Tua, I think they're a playoff team. But when everything's not, and on this team, I mean like running back, I mean like O-line, that's going to affect him. He needs the time to throw, and he likes to take his time as well to throw. So, I think with Flores knowing that and not even doing a lot of play action, not doing like a lot of RPOs and stuff like that, you're not helping Tua at all. So it's like, it's a little bit of column A, it's a little bit of column B, why they're being bad. It's the coaching, it's a bit of the quarterback play, but, at some point these things have to help each other. And they're not showing that, either one's really adapting to, like Tua adapting to the system, and the system maybe like adjusting to do what Tua can benefit from, which is create time for him so he can get downfield shots and stuff like that. Josh Allen, there weren't a lot of turnover worthy plays. There was a fumble and stuff, but for the most part he was taking care of the ball, which is awesome. The Bills are the Bills. Their D-line stepped up this game. I know I've been really critical of the Bills defense. I really want to see them just play better. I think they're more talented than what they're doing. I don't think they're the best, but I still think they're better than what they're doing. And they stepped up, but like I said, it was against the Dolphins O-line that I've been super critical of. So yeah, that's what I think about that game. The Bills are the Bills. The Dolphins will stay away from in terms of Survivor. Eagles Lions, I just have here. How do you have the score 44-6, but then when you're Jalen Hurts, you've thrown for 103 yards and had 7 rushes for 71 yards? I just think it's wild that this score can come out of this game, and the quarterback of the 44 team is just literally a pedestrian, a witness to a bunch of running backs and stuff like that. It's mind-boggling to me that Jalen Hurts is still the starting quarterback of this team. Because he's not helping this team at all. He's just getting points at the end of games. He's not helping. Yeah, so, this team had 46 carries as a team, including running backs, including quarterback carries and stuff like that. So is that a bit of an identity? Sure. Can you replicate that on game-by-game basis to the point where we feel comfortable with that in Survivor? No, you're one of the worst teams in the league. I say it every week. Don't ever get fooled by the stat lines with the Eagles. This was rough. I mean, if they were ever going to win a game, it would have been against the Lions. Like a true victory like this. And, the Lions, there's not much to say. It's just they need to wait for the season to be over to really address their issues. I think, the only game that they might have to win is, that they play Atlanta, late in the season. So don't get cute with that. Don't expect to ever be wanting to take the Lions at any point. Don't expect to want to take the Eagles at any point. I have here Jared Goff 25-34 for 222 yards, but again, to what avail? It means nothing. A lot of that just dump yards. It's nothing. The only positive I had that we could maybe take away from this game is the Eagles line dominated. So yeah, but it's still not enough to help us with anything. It's still not enough to fix this team. You heard the rumblings of Fletcher Cox wanting out and stuff like that. So when all that stuff even starts happening, it's just, I don't know. The Eagles need to fully embrace a rebuild as opposed to dancing around with Jalen Hurts and some of these decisions. They need to get rid of some of their old contracts, all the guys from the Super Bowl that are left. But yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. Eagles Lions. But yeah, moving on from that, Rams-Texans, I feel like the only call I got right this week. Yeah, and they did what good teams do against bad teams. They absolutely, got rowdy and just dumped a whole bunch of points on them. The only real point I have coming out of this is I think Matthew Stafford's now the leader for the MVP race after the last 2 games for Kyler Murray. He kind of took a step back. Dak had the week off with the Cooper Rush playing. Tom Brady had a bit of a mess. So even though he threw 4 TDs, a lot of his mistakes cost that team the game. So I think Stafford has to be the number 1 MVP candidate right now. So good for Stafford. Texans, Texans are what the Texans are. They just it's not much to really say. They got all those points in the 4th quarter, so yeah, not much to analyze there. Just some garbage time stuff. All right, moving on, Bengals Jets. So here's one that I had banked on. Here's one I thought was great, and here's one that would have been great if Joe Burrow, kind of didn't have that little bit of a mess up at the end there with that awkward interception. Okay, but to start, let's not bury the lead. Mike White, I saw the NFL has him nominated for the FedEx Air and Ground Player of the Week, and he was against Stafford and Brady, and he should 100% get it. This guy threw for 405 yards in his first professional starting debut. Incredible, good for him. To beat a team like the Bengals, who going into this weekend was the number one team in the AFC, which that's obviously situationally a little kind of sexier to say than it actually is accurate. But yeah, I just have here what happened to the Bengals. Well, what happened to the Bengals was they got kind of exposed on a lot of underneath routes, and I don't know why you're not covering the underneath with Mike White. I respect the deep ball for sure, but when you're playing a guy like him, take away the easy stuff, and they didn't take away the easy stuff. They let everything out in front of them. It's just you weren't playing Jameis Winston, so why would you play in formation the way they did? Why would you allow that to happen? Because that's all he did. He dinked and dunked all the way down the field consistently. He started the game. Mike White started the game with 10, I think, straight completions, and they weren't hard throws. They were throws that lots of quarterbacks, almost every quarterback and backup quarterback should be making. The Bengals just allowed them to do that, so they beat themselves. Yeah, but then I have in my notes here, on that, so why wouldn't the Jets have this type of game planning with Wilson, where you could have been doing this to teams where teams were playing this the same way, where they challenged Wilson a bit more, and they said, well, if you're going to beat us with your arm, we won't let you we won't let you beat us with your arm. And they kind of cover the deep stuff more. But Zach Wilson still tried to take it, and he wouldn't take the underneath stuff, and he wasn't accurate with the underneath stuff, and he wasn't really accurate with the deep stuff either. So when all those things happen, you don't have a recipe to win. But then when you have Mike White, who is going to just take the underneath stuff, you end up throwing for 400 yards in a victory and catching a TD apparently. So yeah. The Bengals O-line got absolutely dominated. This was kind of something that we noticed with a lot of Bengals games. Their O-line actually isn't as bad as people say, but this game they got absolutely ruined. This is why people talked about how they should be going for O-line in the draft. I think they made the right decision in Jamar Chase, but you're going to get these games where it gets a little out of hand, where the pressure's on Burrow, and then Burrow really needs to be a superhuman in order to overcome the O-line and make the great throws to Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, etc., etc. But what do we take away from this? I think the Bengals are still a young team, personnel-wise, coaching-wise, and then in terms of play calling maturity-wise, like I said, the defense didn't make sense for Mike White. If Mike White's gonna beat you over top, you make White beat you over top, dare him to, because I have more confidence in Mike White missing 5 deep shots than I have him missing 10 underneath shots. And I think they just didn't do this, so they got got. I think they were feeling themselves a bit too much, and Bengals lost because of it. But credit to the Jets, where Mike White took what was available, and the coaching staff called stuff that was appropriate for Mike White. It's just, where were these calls early in the season? You probably could have helped Zach Wilson look a lot better earlier in this year if you were calling these types of plays as consistently as you were for Mike White. So that's a shame that guy is having such a bad rookie year, and you were capable of making adjustments like this. It's a shame. All right, Jaguars, Seahawks. Oh, sorry, just about the Bengals. Moving forward, we'll be super cautious with them. I know I was we gotta start thinking about them seriously, but I think we'll be a little cautious. I think they feel like a team that for the top games of their schedule, and they have a very hard schedule coming up. I think the second hardest one in the NFL. They'll probably play up to their opponents, but when you have these down games, I could imagine if they're playing the Browns and stuff like that, and if the Browns are playing the way they've been playing the last few weeks in a game like Cincinnati, I'd be iffy on that. But I'm almost more confident taking the Bengals against a one division leader or something, as opposed to a 4, which shouldn't make sense, but it almost does. All right, Jaguars, Seahawks. Again, what do we take away from this game? It's Geno Smith probably having the best game of his career against a Jacksonville Jaguars team that has no real NFL talent on it. No offense to everybody in Jacksonville, I know you guys are trying, but Geno Smith best game passing, but he took some real bad sacks, like some real ugly ones where he lost a lot of yards. I mean, and like yeah, they did what they're supposed to do. The score got a bit inflated with that, like, onside kick return and stuff like that. Yeah, I just have here Jags are just bad. They're not helping Trevor Lawrence at all. I've noticed that similar to the Zach Wilson thing, where I understand the first 3-4 weeks where Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence are trying to figure out the NFL. It's like, what can we get away with? What can we do? But you haven't adapted it at all this year, like to this point. And now we're 8 weeks in, and now you're at the point where you're going to start developing bad habits. And that's concerning. That's scary for me. Yeah, so, but I mean, like, what can I say? The scheme's bad, the plan's bad, but you're not deviating from it. That's, a sign of a bad coach. To compare it to, like, what Cliff Kingsbury did when he brought Air Raid in, he adapted so quickly. They became a top rushing team and then, used the pass appropriately. And now this year, they're, a combination of both. Adapt as you need to, right? But they're not. Okay, so in terms of Seattle and their relevance in Survivor, I looked at their record. They're 3-5 right now. If they can win like another game with Geno Smith, they have to. I know Russ just tweeted that he got like the pin taken out of his finger or thumb or finger, whichever it was. But you're still relevant in the playoff picture, which is the best thing in the world for us if we want to use them in Survivor. Because the more relevant your games are down the stretch, the better chance you are going to be like competitive and trying to win those games. And that means, the more reliable you are as a team we can pick in Survivor. So that's good. That's very good. And the NFC is way more competitive. There's way more cannibalism at the bottom of the wild card spots, which is like really nice to see. So awesome. All right, Buccaneers Saints. So ugly game for Tom Brady. Let's just talk about this first off, and then we'll get into the Jameis Winston injury. But I think this game is on Tom Brady. He made a lot of bad decisions, and it wasn't just on his interceptions. He made a lot of bad decisions just throughout the game. I know he was missing Gronk and AB, but that's not really an excuse when you still have your top two running backs, when you still have Mike Evans, when you still have Chris Godwin. It's not an excuse. Like, I understand with teams like Arizona, they lose D-Hop, and it was like last year and you didn't have options. It's like, okay, then if you lose D-Hop, that affects your season or your game. But when you have AJ Green, when you have Christian Kirk, when you have Rondale Moore, when you have Zach Ertz now, you shouldn't be an anemic offense. And when the Buccaneers, who have Bruce Arians as your like offensive-minded head coach, Harold Goodwin as your, I'm pretty sure, your play caller, and you have Tom Brady, who's kind of been in the league for a bit and knows how to do this. Just because you lose your tight end in Rob Gronkowski, no matter how good of a friend he is, and just because you lose AB, no matter how good of like a number 3 receiver he is, with Mike Evans, with Chris Godwin, you should be producing. And you shouldn't be making the incorrect throws on, which is essentially the right pass. And it was just at a rate where if they were just hitting the floor, then fine. But there were interceptions, and these were the things that cost them this game. You shouldn't be losing to Trevor Siemian. You can lose to Jameis Winston in a firefight. That's going to happen sometimes. But when Jameis Winston leaves injured, it sucks. So, yeah, I know Brady had like a good box stat and stuff like that, but it was his decisions that really cost him this game. So that sucks for anybody who took the Bucs in Survivor because they were the better team. They should have won, but they didn't. Yeah. So, but he's got to wear that. Yeah, there was some bad reffing too on some like non-holding calls on like Godwin too, which I will like admit that sucks. But yeah. Moving on to the Saints though. So that Jameis injury, he's probably out for the year, which sucks. But does it suck because they're gonna probably put in Taysom Hill. I don't know if they go for a quarterback that like maybe Cam Newton comes in, to bolster. I can't imagine they just sit with Trevor Siemian. And I feel like they're in the same boat as like the Seahawks, where you can challenge for like an NFC wildcard spot. But this is where my head's at with the Saints. They didn't use, I kept banging the table saying, if you're gonna have Jameis, use Jameis, because this is how you're gonna win games. You're either gonna win or lose because of Jameis, but it'll be because of the decisions you make, right? don't let the other team like dictate how your game goes. But they weren't doing that, and now you lose Jameis. So it's like I feel like this team that I've been critical of isn't even losing too much because they weren't utilizing Jameis to his fullest outside of the Green Bay game to start. So how much do I really dock the Saints right now? I don't know. Like the Jameis quarterback thing may end up being like a non-factor in the relevance of like their season, but and that means I think Jameis Winston's a better quarterback than Taysom Hill or whatever. It's just that you have Jameis, but you don't use him the right way. So it's like that could have been anybody else there. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what they do at the quarterback position before we kind of stock up, stock down them. But yeah. All right, Patriots, Chargers, the other big loss that we took here. I thought for sure this was like Chargers winning in a, just going to blow the barn doors off the Patriots. But, Bill Belichick reminds everybody he's a really good coach and he can stop quarterbacks that are new to his defensive system. So, yeah, he outcoached, the offensive staff of the Chargers. And I don't think this was like a matter of anything in terms of like analytics and like this new progressive forward thinking like football that Staley is known for. I think Bill Belichick just had some answers for him. Kind of had some answers for Herbert on the third downs that he usually capitalizes on. He was still efficient on third downs, but they stopped him enough. Pushing Herbert to like some 2 INTs, which weren't entirely his fault. There was just like definitely some route communication with the Cook INT, and I think the other one was just like a high pass that went off the receiver's gloves, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. But I think this is again kind of similar to the Bengals situation, which is a little bit of a young coaching staff, young quarterback, where if these guys are a little more veteran, a little older, a little more wiser, they don't fall into this trap game. But credit to the Patriots, do what they do. But like I said, Mac Jones dinks and dunks, gets them points, does enough. They got that the 6 and stuff like that. I can't remember. But the defensive game is like what really kind of like caused the issues. So the Patriots basically did what I expect the Patriots to do. The Chargers, however, this is where I want to talk about. It's just like similar with the Bengals. I was high on the Chargers and I'm pumping up the Chargers, and the Chargers really shouldn't have lost this, but they did. So moving forward, what kind of teams can do this to the Chargers? I feel like any defensive competent team with a defensive minded head coach could probably maybe put the pressure on Herbert. So we'll do an insight into like their upcoming games in the next video to remind ourselves who they have coming up and if anybody really is going to be able to push them. But I think for the most part, the Chargers are still safe. It was just a week where we got by them, which sucks. Okay, so the Washington football team versus the Broncos. Yeah, these two teams. Like, we're not confident in either of these two teams. Like, we can't really talk about them. Bad football. Heineke's bad. They need to get rid of him. There was, I don't know if anything went through, but earlier today, apparently they were talking to Buffalo about getting Mitchell Trubisky, which, like, really isn't an answer to any problems, but, I don't know. I guess it's just different, so I guess you're willing to try it, but I don't know why they're not trying to get other players. Like, where's the Marcus Mariota talk? Where's, like, all this other stuff that could be fixing your season and you're not doing anything? Similar to the Broncos, their O-line's playing fine, but, like, Teddy Bridgewater isn't doing anything behind it. And then they do the Von Miller trade to the Rams, and it's just like, well, what are you? Are you selling? Are you buying? Like, what's your plan? I think you can still try and be competitive after getting rid of Von Miller because you did get such nice picks for him. It wasn't like a 5th round pick. It was like 2 picks. So, luckily for them, they can just seamlessly put those in the system to reload this roster. And this Denver Broncos roster is like great outside of the quarterback. So, like, I thought they were going to be a team that would have been trying to push for, a backup level, like maybe like a Nick Foles or something. You get Nick Foles in Denver, you can't tell me this team's not better. So, yeah, but like I said, in terms of Survivor, as long as Bridgewater's there, as long as Drew Lock's there, as long as Heineke's there, as long as Fitzpatrick's not playing, we're not touching these teams. We're probably just picking against Washington. I wouldn't pick against Broncos just yet, like exclusively to pick against the Broncos. Just I think that the defense is still relatively talented. They could win. But the running backs are looking good for the Broncos. Melvin Gordon's looking like he's still got some tread on the tires. And, Javonte Williams is obviously talented and playing well. Okay, Cowboys Vikings. This is like I talked about this, right? The Vikings play down to their opponent, and here you go, the ultimate example. Because I feel like if Dak Prescott was out there, this was a 400-yard game for both quarterbacks, for him and Cousins. I feel like you put Cooper Rush out there, and look what they do. It's terrible. And I was reading some stats there. So, Kirk Cousins leading like the NFL in like downfield throws in the fourth quarter, but for quarter 1, 2, and 3, he's not. He's one of the most conservative quarterbacks in taking the underneath pass. So what does that tell you? That the Vikings don't really start playing football until the fourth by choice. Like it's not because like other teams impose their will. It's like the quarterback is making decisions to just let the game get to the fourth quarter and not throwing the ball to like Justin Jefferson and not throwing the ball to Adam Thielen deep to try and get big leads and stuff. Like that's why they're in these tight games all the time. It's because they don't turn it on until the fourth quarter. The most concerning thing for all of Survivor and just for real football, if you want any chance about making the playoffs, you're essentially minimizing your season from 18 games to a quarter of that because you're only playing for one quarter of each game, like appropriately, if that makes sense. Like I'm not a math guy, but just you're literally playing one like a quarter. Sorry, you're not playing as much football that you're in control of. You have Justin Jefferson, you have Adam Thielen, you have a decent O-line, you have Kirk Cousins who's playing as well as he is, but you refuse to throw the ball down the field early in the game. It feels like it's scared tactics, and it's like tactics you should be like implementing with a guy like Taylor Heineke, where you don't trust him because Taylor Heineke's a bad quarterback, but Kirk Cousins is playing good football. So why at the halfway mark of the season are you not trusting Kirk Cousins in the first, second, and third quarter to throw the ball down the field? It's so concerning. It's so frustrating, I imagine, for any Minnesota Vikings fan. And it is so hard for us in Survivor to deal with because week in, week out, we would like to understand if we think the Vikings are a better team than this team or that team. And in reality, we don't understand how good or how bad the Vikings really are because they don't really play a full game of football. So, just a real long way of saying I give up on the Vikings on picking them to ever win a game. I give up on the Vikings on picking against them because they might win every single game. So, in terms of Survivor, I can't touch this at all. And for the Cowboys, I mean, they're a good team. They're awesome with Dak. Hopefully, they'll never play Cooper Rush again this season. But yeah, they're a good team. We'll play good teams against bad teams. So that's awesome. Last game, KC versus the New York Giants last night. Again, I feel bad for Daniel Jones, still like really no receivers. I don't even think he's like really got like a full game with Golladay outside of like maybe one game, but like no, it's tough. That's brutal for him. And KC is still just showing nothing. Like both those teams are exactly what we kind of were upset with by them. Like we thought maybe the Giants were getting sneaky, but no, they kind of took their win and then like fought back to some losses. And then KC is just that team that, Travis Kelce can't get involved in games. McCole Hardman's catching touchdowns apparently, but he's like never a factor in any other game. So it's like, what is there on that team that's bankable? Nothing, because your defense is still bad. Your quarterback is still playing a really bad style of game that's just not helping you. So yeah, guys, that's my week 8 review. I'm starting to lose my tongue here. But yeah, I'll do a video the next 2 days about previewing the Week 9 season. Hopefully there's some good matchups for us to pick for Survivor. Hopefully you guys are still in it. Hopefully, we will be able to properly identify the games that will help you make it to the end of your season and hopefully win a bunch of money. But yeah, guys, I think we learned a lot this week. I really do. I think we did in terms of the Vikings, in terms of like the Bengals, in terms of like the Chargers and stuff like that. I think a lot of those teams we still need more clarity on. And we just got to be a lot smarter than we are with our picks. But yeah, good luck with your picks this week, guys. I'll see you in my next video.